Welcome to today's webinar, brought to you by the Current Consulting Group and sponsored by DrugPak. Today's presentation is titled Security in the Drug Testing Industry, Data and Policies. Today's webinar qualifies for one continuing education credit from SHRM, HRCI, and CCDAP for those who attend in its entirety. You will receive information following today's webinar on how to apply for that credit. Shortly, we'll be sharing with you a video from today's sponsor, DrugPak.
And welcome everybody to today's presentation. I'm happy to have a co-presenter with me today. My name is Rick Tennant. I'm with the Current Consulting Group, and the co-host and co-presenter today is David Gonzalez from DrugPak. David's work has, as you can see on the screen, David has worked with DrugPak for almost 30 years as the original author of the DrugPak software suite for Windows. David has overseen DrugPak's transition to a fully hosted software as a service solution. DrugPak has over 400 customers and processes over 8 million results annually. And thank you, and David, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, with this, we'd like to start off with a poll question on security measures, and that is, how often do you review and update your security measures? A, monthly, B, quarterly, C, annually, or last, weekly? I'm continually thinking about them. Please select your response, and then we will update the results here. All right, excellent. Hey, I love that. The last one wins with 33% weekly. I'm continually thinking about them. That's one of the things that should be on all of our minds. And I'm glad to see people are doing it monthly as well as quarterly. So this is one of those things that is ever evolving, and we can't hardly turn on the news without hearing of somebody that's been breached or access being granted or given to somebody else. Or unauthorized individuals, I should say. And so with today's agenda, I'm going to start us off. I just want to talk, just have a few slides to introduce the topic and to discuss a few items, and then I'll turn the time over to David for the bulk of the presentation. As you can see here on the first bullet point, the importance of adapting security protocols to evolving threats. As an industry, we gather personal information and we store it both physically and electronically. Paper copies of CCFs as well as the electronic copies of results are probably found in every one of our offices. Now, organizations, we've been securing paper for decades. However, even though we've gotten a lot better at protecting our confidential information, we still hear of examples on a regular basis of things being leaked or documents being found in unsecured locations or being accessed by individuals who are unauthorized to do so. Personally, over my career, I've dealt with collection sites simply throwing away old filled out CCFs in dumpsters behind their buildings, or leaving completed CCFs in areas where the general public has access to them, such as like an MRO box or a to be faxed or scanned box. Something where there needs to be some action taken with these CCFs or documents, ATFs, alcohol testing forms at the end of the day, and so they're left in a general or an unsecured area. Now, eCCFs have aided us in controlling unwanted or unwarranted access in cases like this. However, they're still paper forms, such as, like I mentioned a moment ago, alcohol testing forms or POCT devices and the results of those. If you are a collection site or a TPA, please take a moment and review your security measures and where these forms are stored for the long and the short term. If you're a company representative on today's call, it's okay. Reach out to your provider and ask them how these documents are secured and stored. Secondly, they're how to protect your data effectively by maximizing security through physical, administrative, and technical measures. Now, these three measures are vital to any security program, and with that, as I mentioned a moment ago, we've gotten better at physical security measures. We lock our offices and buildings. We lock our computers when we walk away. We lock sensitive paper forms in filing cabinets or in areas of the offices with limited access by personnel and the general public. We have cameras, we have motion detectors, we have physical keys, as well as electronic access mechanisms to monitor our physical environment and our workstations. These measures help these measures as they're visible and we talk about them with our clients. These measures do help our clients and donors feel at ease knowing that we do take security and their sensitive information seriously. But in my career, I've also heard of donors and clients alike asking questions about us, what we do with this information. For example, where does this information get stored, or who has access to it, and how do I get my results, and who gets my results? Can I call and get my results? And so with that, these are questions that I'm sure every one of us have gotten asked over our careers, and it's something that we should be able to speak to either with documentation or some canned specific answers. In addition on the second bullet point, in addition to physical security, administrative and technical measures are vital to maintaining our data security. And I'll reserve my comments here and let David speak to those more. Lastly here on the third bullet point, how DrugPak helps organizations create a security protocol and updates their strategy tailored to their specific needs. At CCG, we wanted to do something a little bit different this time. As we headed into the fall months, we thought we would do something like this, and so thank you for joining us for this security discussion. The thought came up at the end of last year, and so it's been mulled around for a little bit. It's just taken us a few months to put it together. And so we've invited David Gonzalez with DrugPak to co-present and to speak to these three areas of security. We hope this presentation will give you each that are attending some ideas on how to update your protocols and some of the areas that maybe you didn't even think about. So with that, the introduction, just 2 more slides from me, everybody, and then I'll turn the time over to David. There have been breaches in the drug testing industry, and the first bullet point here talks about a breach in 2018 where a drug testing laboratory exposed some personal information and drug test results of basically thousands of individuals. It raised concerns, as many of you may remember or are aware of, or if you just think about it in general. Anytime you have a data breach, it always has a cause for concern. As far with being compromised, we have access to test results. We have access to medications that we've been prescribed or are currently taking, and then we might have access to a positive or a negative result. And then in recent years, cyber attacks targeting healthcare and medical facilities have raised concerns for the security in medical test records, as well as those including drug test results. The breaches that compromise drug testing can lead to identity theft, but at least, or in even the best of situations, it makes our donors and our clients question the integrity of the test results that we produce and share with people. If you think about it, we gather names, driver's license numbers, sometimes social security numbers or dates of birth, phone numbers, email addresses, and even signatures. Breaches in this with this information are going to make your customers and the donors themselves concerned and worried about how their data is being stored. All right, just a few more examples that we wanted to share. And as everybody on the call could do, you can easily find examples of security breaches that have affected several million individuals. And we did just that in preparation for today's presentation. The company number one of the largest providers in their respective industry. As you can see there, it was the breach was caused by a security flaw in a third-party billing collections vendor. And so it wasn't even the company that exposed or was breached. It was one of their partners. The personal and financial information was around almost 8 million customers were compromised. And in the same situation with company number two, also another major company in the same industry, and they had they were using the same third-party billing, and that third-party billing customer, or that third-party billing company, their vulnerabilities were exposed. And this time it affected almost 12 million patients. And the last one here, a breach occurred when a contractor server was accessed by unauthorized individuals, and it potentially exposed personal and medical information of thousands of patients. Now, these three examples are examples of companies that necessarily didn't do anything wrong themselves, but they were partnered up with a vendor who was compromised, and in so doing, the company itself had their customers compromised. And so, with that, we'll talk more about security examples in the physical, the technical, and the administrative world by turning the time over to David Gonzalez with DrugPak.
Thank you, Rick. So we're going to be talking about adapting security protocols in the three areas of physical, administrative, and technical safeguards. But first, let's talk about what are we securing. And probably the most important thing we're securing is our system integrity, our functionality. We need our systems to remain uncompromised and able to work so that we can run our businesses. You face threats like ransomware, where your data gets encrypted and you can't access it, stops your business altogether. But aside from keeping our systems running, we're primarily interested with securing information. And that falls under a variety of different categories, including personally identifiable information, such as names, social security numbers, driver's licenses, phone numbers, addresses, birth dates, protected health information, in the case of HIPAA-covered entities, and that can, and typically doesn't include drug testing results, but could certainly include prescriptions, which MROs receive. We're interested in protecting financial information, credit cards, and bank accounts, our own confidential information or information that our customers share with us about their businesses, and our own intellectual property, and our operational information, the information that we need to run our businesses, just as simple as our list of accounts, how do we contact them, what are their subscriptions like, all of our billing information, all of that needs to be secured. So there are some standards which can provide you guidance in establishing security protocols in your own business. And DrugPak, these standards that we're going to talk about overlap, and DrugPak complies with all of them. The first one is PCI DSS. That's the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards. And these are security standards that are required in order for you to qualify for processing credit card information and other banking information. There are independent certifying bodies that can certify you as PCI DSS compliant. DrugPak uses TrustWave. Then there's the HIPAA security standards. The HIPAA regulations have a robust listing of security standards, which are kind of a gold standard for what you need to do to protect sensitive information in general, not just protected health information. Now, it's worth noting that drug testing is not typically considered to be healthcare, but depending on the nature of your company, if you see patients, you may be a covered entity, and you may be handling things like prescriptions and physical exam results that are arguably protected health information. So DrugPak handles this by adhering to HIPAA security standards, and we serve as a business associate to covered entities. And our licensing agreement includes a built-in BAA, or business associate agreement, that outlines that we understand what our responsibilities are under HIPAA to secure protected health information. Finally, there's the National Institute of Science and Technology Special Publication 853. This is the publication that DrugPak's own internal written information security policy is based on, and it essentially covers all of the requirements of PCI DSS and HIPAA security standards, although HIPAA has some specific concerns that the NIST doesn't take care of. But this document, it provides security and privacy controls recommendations for federal information systems and organizations. Now, I mentioned that there are independent certifying agencies for PCI DSS, and the same is not true for HIPAA. There is no such thing as HIPAA certification. If someone claims to be HIPAA certified, that's a falsehood. There is no certifying body for HIPAA. You certainly could claim to be HIPAA compliant, but there is no certifying body for that, and similarly with the NIST. So we're going to be talking about maximizing protection through three main categories of safeguards: physical safeguards, administrative safeguards, and technical safeguards. We're going to go through them kind of quickly for the physical and administrative, and we're going to focus more on the technical safeguards, which are the DrugPak-y things that we do as a data host. So physical safeguards are things that we all are mostly familiar with: locks and bolts, name tags, video cameras, access. We want to control access to our facility. We want to control access to physical workstations. We need to have a backup plan that probably involves physically taking backup materials off of location. And then for physical devices, we need to have controls for tracking who they are assigned to. We need to have procedures for reusing them, cleaning them off if we're going to retain the devices and use them in a non-covered aspect, and how we can safely dispose of devices once they've reached the end of their lifetimes. And finally, we need to have accountability logs for those physical safeguards of tracking who is responsible for physical devices throughout the device's lifetimes. So we're going to move on to administrative safeguards. And administrative safeguards actually cover a great deal of physical and technical safeguards, These are the policies that you have in your business that govern your security posture. So one of the most important things to have a security management process is to have an assigned security responsibility. That's one person who is ultimately responsible for managing your security program. Now, that person may not be the only person that is responsible for managing security, but they are the person who is primarily responsible. That person can also have other responsibilities. For example, I'm general manager at DrugPak, and currently I am our security officer. So you need to have someone who's going to have ultimate responsibility for the whole program. Then you need to have a variety of different types of policies. You need to classify your information and storage methods. You need to differentiate between information that's not scoped, it's not PII, it's not PHI, it's not protected in any way, or information that is personally identifiable information or protected health information, or classified private or intellectual property information, and set up different rules for how that data can be stored on what specific devices, on what networks, and with what protections. You should have a change management system. And in the course of a company like DrugPak, we have an engineering change management system which tracks all changes to the software, what the scope is, what is supposed to be changed, and we have an authorization to implement a change. And that makes sense in the terms of adding features to software, changing code, but you might also want to have a change management system for your own procedures for how do you handle calling a DER when they're not available, or any number of policies. And then as you change your policies, you need to document when those changes take place so that you have a history of when policies were in effect at any given time. You need to have an incident response program, a program for dealing with inadvertent releases of information. What do you do? Who do you notify? Incident response is very important. You need to have a vendor management program. You need to identify the vendors that impact your security and determine, particularly if you're a HIPAA covered entity, that you have a business associate agreement with any vendor that is handling data that assists you in the process of managing the covered information. You need to have an acceptable use policy which outlines how data can be used within your organization depending on the classification and storage rules. We're going to spend a moment talking about having a risk analysis program. This would be, having a risk analysis program would be something that's in your policy. There are three elements to your risk analysis program. One is the vulnerabilities, and the vulnerability is basically a weakness in your system that could potentially be leveraged to a weakness in your system design, your procedures, your implementation, or your internal controls that could be exercised, accidentally triggered, or intentionally exploited and result in a security breach or a violation of your security policy. It's a vulnerability. You want to identify what those are. And then a threat is the potential for a person or thing to trigger or exploit a vulnerability. And they're different kinds of threats that can occur within your information system. Threats could be grouped into like natural, human, and environmental. Floods, earthquakes, tornadoes, landslides. Human threats could be, password leaking or intentional release of protected information, or dedicated network and computer-based attacks, malicious software upload, unauthorized access. Or they could be unintentional, like inadvertent data entry or deletion of data, or inaccurate data entry. So it's important. And then the risk is, you would consider what's the probability that a particular threat will exercise a particular vulnerability, and then try to anticipate what is the resulting impact if that should occur, and then finally come up with incident response for dealing with a risk that becomes realized. Something else that you need to have in your administrative security plan is something to manage your workforce security. You want to make sure that people who have access to scoped data, and by scoped data, I mean data that has any form of protected classification, whether it's personally identifiable, protected health information, confidential, or proprietary information. You want to make sure that you have systems in place that authorize specific people to have access to specific types of information. You need to have a training program so that your employees can become aware of what your policies and procedures are. At DrugPak, we have initial employee training on data security, and we have annual refresher training where every employee has to sign off that they have received the documentation that we've provided that outlines our training protocols. You need to have clearance. You need to determine that the people who have access to scoped information are trustworthy. And at DrugPak, we perform background checks, and no one has access to scoped data unless they pass a criminal background check. You need to have a sanction policy. When an employee makes a mistake and releases information that should have been secured, you need to have a policy in place that deals with those violations. Could be something like putting a demerit on file, and if they have 3 demerits in the year, then they're terminated. I don't want to guide your policy for you, but there need to be consequences for employees that violate your security policies. And then you need to have procedures in place to deal with termination. How do you reclaim the hardware that your employees have had access to? How do you disable their access to the various systems that provide access to scope data? So workforce security is very important. Response and reporting. You need to have a backup plan. You need to back up your data into some form of removable media or remotely accessible media that you can take your data offline. You need to have contingency plans for anticipating when parts of the system break down or when information is accidentally released. What are you going to do under those circumstances? Information systems are continuously logging information, and you need to have a policy whereby you periodically review those logs to see who's accessing the data, where are they accessing it from, what are they accessing. You need to have disaster recovery planning and testing and revision procedures. So in the case of DrugPak, testing and revision procedures, that goes with our change management system. that when we make changes to the software, we test them and release it in a controlled environment and then do a general release. But you can have testing and revision procedures for other policies and procedures that you implement in your offices. So now we're going to get into what I think is the fun stuff. These are the geeky things that a software provider can provide. A lot of these things are considerations that you want to have in your own offices, but you want to consider all of these different opportunities for enhancing security.
Yes. All right, everybody. We've got one other poll, and this is just the second poll. Do you have a security questionnaire that you give to your vendors? A, yes, B, no, or C, I would like to know more about what questions I should be asking. So everybody answer these, and then we'll have the results displayed here shortly. All right. Hey, that's great. 18% of us have that we do have a security questionnaire that we send to our vendors. 27% we don't have a questionnaire to send to our vendors, and then 64% of us would like to know more about the questions we should be asking. Now, with that, David will cover this. This falls into the category of also administrative, as well as it could be technical, depending on what your contractors or your partners might have. And so this last part about technical safeguards that David's going to speak to will give you some ideas on what you can be asking your vendors and partners, and then we can get you some more information after today's webinar. So David, I'll turn the time back over to you.
Thank you, Rick. So the number one technical safeguard that you can implement is to delegate the safety to someone else. And in the case of DrugPak, we delegate the processing of credit card information to a company called Authorize.net, which is a Visa-based credit card and banking transaction processing platform. We don't store credit card information. When it's all transparent to the end user, but if they put in a credit card, we don't keep it. It goes to Authorize.net, and then we authenticate with Authorize.net and interact with them through a token that says we charge this card, but we don't actually know what that card is. On the same notes, our customers are delegating technical safeguards by using DrugPak. DrugPak is implementing all of these policy, the physical safeguards, the administrative safeguards, and technical safeguards to safeguard your data. And delegation is, you choose a good partner, then you're someone who has experience in protecting scope data, then you're in good hands. So, for example, DrugPak is hosted on the Microsoft Azure platform. And Microsoft Azure is a cloud-based system with data centers around the country, and they handle all of the physical elements of managing the information. They have the physical security in place, and we at DrugPak don't need to worry about that. We can think more abstractly about how we're dealing with data, but we don't have to worry about physical servers and that kind of stuff. So antivirus is on the top of the list. Everyone should be having antivirus on their local computers. We scan all of our software systems. You need to have, this is going to show up in your administrative controls. You need to have a policy that manages what is and is not an acceptable antivirus system. You may want to specify and provide a singular antivirus solution to be used by all of your staff. Then there's firewalls. The firewall is typically a hardware device, but it can be a software device. And the firewall, it's a term you're probably familiar with, you may or may not know what it does, but a firewall controls the traffic in and out of a network or a portion of your network. And firewalls do things like restricting what ports activity can take place on and where you can connect from. So something that we do in our firewalls, we do IP blocking by country and region. So we talk about an IP, it's Internet Protocol. It's an IP address is like the address of a computer. And IP addresses, every computer system that's on the internet has an IP address. And every computer in your network, in your private network, has a private IP address. And most likely when people on your network go out onto the internet, all of the traffic appears to come from one IP address, which is your public IP address. So IP addresses, public IP addresses are generally geographical, and there are ranges of IP addresses that correlate to different countries. So one of the things that we do at DrugPak is we block traffic from countries that we do not and will not be having customers in, customers that are countries that are known to be a hostile technological foes. So we're talking about Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, various Soviet republics as well. So we handle IP blocking by country and region and just block out large portions of the world that we're not interested in any of their traffic at all. Another thing we can do with IP addresses is restrict access to approved origin IP addresses. So for example, a DrugPak customer could say, I only want my staff to log in to DrugPak from my office. So the office is going to have a public IP address, and in your account settings, you can specify that for your account, you only accept traffic from your public IP address. And that's a great way to reduce exposure. So even if a member of your staff has their password compromised, someone on the outside wouldn't be able to access the system because they're not physically in your office. And along with firewalls, you can have something called an intrusion detection system. DrugPak uses a pfSense firewall and an intrusion detection system called Snort. And an intrusion detection system is kind of like an antivirus system. Instead of looking, antivirus systems look at the contents of files to determine if they contain malicious content, and an intrusion detection system looks at the content of packets of communication that are in motion between the client and the host. So that's all about firewalls. Penetration testing is another safeguard you can implement. DrugPak gets penetration testing from a company called Backbone Security, which is a partner with the company Qualys, which is a big name in security. In penetration testing, what happens is you contract with a service provider and you say, okay, here's our publicly facing posture. Here are our websites. Here are our domains. This is where we are. And this is the software we use. And here's a password so you can get into the system. And then that party will try to break your system. They'll try to break it from the inside using the passwords that you've provided, and they'll try to break it from the outside using port scanning and other exploits to try to break into your system. Penetration testing will end up giving you a report card on a variety of metrics to determine how strong your security posture is. And it's a lot better than just using guesswork to say, well, I'm using my antivirus and I've set up my firewall and I think it's okay. You want to hire someone who's actively going to try to attack you. And this can cost a pretty penny. I think the backbone security scan, the initial scan that we get each year, costs about $12,000. And then if they find anything, then you can purchase a follow-up scan at a deeply discounted rate. So you can fix any problems and then have them scan it again and give you a new final report card. So penetration testing, so we're talking about, things that you want to ask your vendors. You want to ask if they have policies about antivirus, how do they have an intrusion detection system? Do they do penetration testing? That kind of thing. So in a backup system, we talked about backups in the physical safeguards, talking about taking backups off-site. But backup is a technical thing, and it belongs under technical safeguards. And when you design your backup system, there are two primary metrics you want to consider your tolerance for, and that's the recovery point objective and the recovery time objective. So the recovery point objective is how much data could you possibly lose if you have to go back to a backup. So going back many years, a traditional backup routine might be something like, we back up our local networks every night. So you have an RPO of 24 hours. You want to be able to recover everything up to 24 hours ago, and you've lost 24 hours of data. In the Microsoft Azure database system, we have an RPO of 5 seconds. The Microsoft Azure is continuously backing up, and if we have to go to a backup, the most we're going to lose is 5 seconds worth of data. And then there's the recovery time objective, which is in my program, when I have to go to my backup system, how long is it going to take me to actually locate the backup, mount it, find what I need to restore, and restore it? That's the recovery time objective. DrugPEC has a recovery time objective of 1 hour. In our tests, it actually takes about 20 minutes to restore a backup. So, that's something to consider in your backup system, the recovery point objective and the recovery time objective. What's your tolerance for lost productivity? How much work do you need to redo if you restore your backup system? So next on the list to talk about is encryption. Encryption is a big deal. It's how we protect scoped information. And there are two main considerations for encryption, and that's encryption in motion and encryption at rest. So encryption in motion is encrypting the data while it's in transit between two parties. For example, you send an email with an attachment to someone, and unless you're using a very specific type of system, your average email is not encrypted in motion. The communication between you and the mail servers and every mail server down the line that this data has to hop to get to your reference is not encrypted. It's in plain text. When data is encrypted, is when you have something like an HTTPS connection. You would see that in the address bar of your browser. HTTPS means it's secure. HTTP means it's not secure. HTTP is hypertext transfer protocol, and S means it's secure. In the old days, the protocol that secured HTTPS was called SSL, or Secure Socket Layer, but in the last 10 years, it's moved to TLS, and TLS 1.2 is considered the minimum standard. TLS 2.0 is available, and to enable, our systems are compatible up to TLS 3.0. And if you want to upgrade your browsers to support TLS 3.0, you need to do a little Googling about how to do it, how to turn it on in different browsers. But most of the modern browsers are going to have sufficient, they're going to support TLS 1.2. And if you see HTTPS in the address bar, then you can feel confident that the data that you're receiving has been secured in transit. Then we talk about encryption at rest. This is when the data isn't moving anywhere. And the most popular standard for encryption right now is AES, or Advanced Encryption Standard. And it is the choice of the United States federal government for securing sensitive information. Now, Azure SQL, that's the database that DrugPak uses. I have it under here. It doesn't actually use AES. It has another encryption system. But in the DrugPak system, in the Azure SQL system, the data in the database is encrypted, and you need to have an access key in order to access it out of the database and to work with it. So even if someone were to hack the DrugPak system and gain access to the SQL database without also having the decryption key, they wouldn't be able to access the data. DrugPak handles, and you probably handle, other forms of documents, PDFs, Excel spreadsheets, Word documents, and zip files. And PDF, that's the Adobe Portable Document Format. PDF supports password protecting documents, and Excel also supports password protecting documents. And both of these softwares use the AES protocol for encrypting the data. You just want to make sure you have a nice, strong password. This, and then zip files, is you can compress multiple files, single files or multiple files together. You can use WinZip to compress documents in Windows through the Explorer by right-clicking on a file and choosing compress. And in that process, it also provides for a password protection option. And WinZip also uses AES. And I bring up WinZip. DrugPak, we don't use WinZip for encrypting documents because we only handle PDFs and Excel spreadsheets for transitioning between people reports. But in your environment, you may receive a fax which has been digitized, and it's now just, excuse me, just a regular old image file. And then you have a trading partner, an employer who wants to see that data. If you email that file and it's not encrypted at rest, it won't be encrypted in motion. So you need to use a system to encrypt your files at rest before you email them. Otherwise, you need to have like some sort of secure email system where, and a secure email system could use a variety of techniques, some of which involve digital certificates, which are a little confusing and inaccessible. And then there are other systems like we use in our support system where you receive a message that's an email message that says, hey, you have a secure message, go here to log in. And then it takes you to a website where you put in your username and password, and then it connects through HTTPS, and then everything that you see on screen has been encrypted in transit to you. All right, that was a mouthful. We also have another real simple technical safeguard is redacting sensitive information. In the case of DrugPak, when we report social security numbers, the default behavior of the system is to withhold the first 5 digits of the social security number and only display the last 4. And this is something that you can do in your own documents before you send them an email, as you can, essentially black out portions of the document that contain sensitive scoped information. You need to be careful, though, if you are blocking out sensitive information in different types of software like Microsoft Word or in Adobe Acrobat, which is the PDF authoring system. Sometimes when you think you are redacting something by putting a block of a black square over it, you are just doing a cosmetic covering of the data, which would be fine if you printed it. But if you then send the data to someone else, they could actually sometimes highlight the text behind the little black rectangle that you put in front of it. So you have to be careful when you're redacting information. Like if you're going to redact a PDF, you then want to maybe export that to a TIFF, to an image format that doesn't have the metadata of the actual text in there, so that it just has a picture of the redacted information. Or go into the document and just manually delete the first 5 digits of a social security number. Just redact information wherever possible if you're going to be sharing it, and the scoped information isn't critical to understanding of the data you're discussing. So something else we talk about with security is, how do we know that the data that we're looking at hasn't changed? And we handle this in DrugPak when we produce PDF reports by digitally signing the PDF. And then when you open that in a compatible viewer, you can see that there's a digital signature on the document, and that attests that the document hasn't been changed since it was created. And other PDF and Excel also give you the ability with your password protection to lock documents and prevent them from being changed. So access controls. These are things that control an individual's access to the data, and things like passwords, usernames and passwords, I should have that under access controls. Single sign-on is a type of access control where you, rather than having a separate password for every vendor, you kind of centralize where your passwords are stored, and you might have seen this in your personal life where you go to a website and they say create an account or log in using Google or log in using Facebook or log in using Microsoft. And this is where this is called a single sign-on, and you are signing on to a third party like Facebook or Google or Microsoft, and then that party is providing authentication information to the website you're going to. So DrugPak supports single sign-on with Microsoft, and we also support two-factor authentication. And you may be familiar with this. Your bank probably uses this. Facebook offers it. It's where you log in with the username and password, and then you receive another challenge, which is like a message that will go to your email or to your cell phone that then has a code for you to enter or a link. So they're using two factors. One is your username and password, and then the other method is the secondary backup formation, so backup system. All right, so we're running out of time here. So password storage, you want to have policies that control password complexity and periodicity, where you say you need to change your password every 90 days or things like that. DrugPak supports that. And DrugPak provides a lot of proactive suspicious activity tracking, login failures. We lock you out if you fail 3 times in a row. New geography, if you log in 100 miles from the last place you log in, we'll send you an email and say, hey, we got you logging in from a different location. Is this you? If an administrative account is created, we send a notice to all administrators. If database filters, which are used to restrict company access, are removed, we send an administrative email. If you run reports without any limit, if you get a report that says, give me all of the data, we'll send a warning email. Or if you run an unusual number of reports or download an unusual number of documents. So I think we're coming in right under the wire. We have some links here. If you are interested in HIPAA security, this is a great starting point. It'll lead you to 5 documents or more that all talk about different aspects of HIPAA security compliance. There's a Health and Human Services Security Risk Assessment tool. The NIST 853 is there, and a document about WinZip encryption.
David, we're good for now. There is one fun question. We had a few questions. Most of them were specifics about questionnaires that we should ask our vendors. But the one light and fun question is, how realistically, how often do I need to change my passwords, in your opinion? So
I think that 90 days is a standard that hasn't really been challenged.
Okay, no, thank you. And David, thank you for the, you mentioned it at the beginning of your presentation that it was there at the technical section, that it's the geeky stuff. And it was also interesting stuff. So thank you for making the geeky stuff interesting. And I hope that today's presentation gave all of us something to think about on better ways to control our security measures with our data.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. On behalf of the Current Consulting Group and DrugPak, we hope you have found today's presentation informative and helpful. I want to thank Rick Tennant for facilitating this presentation and David Gonzalez for speaking on this topic and sharing his expertise. If you've submitted a question and we didn't answer it here today, we will answer you offline, and we will send you information in a follow-up email on how to access the recorded version of today's presentation. And in addition, we will also send you continuing education information for those of you that qualify to receive 1 credit for attending today's presentation in its entirety. Thank you for attending today's presentation, and this concludes today's webinar. Have a wonderful day.